Hi, I'm Teresa Greco, the host of the Happy Hour. We're on the show, we talk about the things that can help us to live our happiest life physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. Today on the show, I have a good friend of mine, Kim Olver. Thank you so much for being on the show.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Kim, I would love for you to share a little bit more about yourself with our audience today.
Okay, so my name is Kim Olver. I am the founder of the Mental Freedom Experience and the owner of Olver International. My background is in counseling. I'm also a board certified coach, and I just love helping people learn the tools they need to live a happier life. So we're really on the same wavelength with this. We come at it maybe from different angles, but I absolutely love that because I believe a lot of our unhappiness may be self-created because we don't have the knowledge about these tools that would help us. So I'm
Yeah,
excited
thank you.
to talk today.
Yeah, thank you. And my brand, my company, my shows, my all of it has to do with giving people the practical tools to help us because you're right. We don't know these tools. That me as an educator, almost of 30 years, these tools aren't embedded in curriculum. We don't learn them there. We don't learn them in our social circles unless maybe some people have gone, into some therapy and counseling, but even there, sometimes the tools aren't always shared, right? That they can go in and just have a session of venting, but not walk away with any practical tools that they can then use to help themselves and help those around them. And so you've developed a solution for that.
Yes. Yeah, I have, and I'm excited. I know you know all about it because you're one of my certified specialists in mental freedom. So we can talk about that, or we can talk about whatever is on your agenda. But I agree with you. Occasionally, you'll find, at least I see it on my feeds in social media, there'll be a meme that says something like, "You can only control your own behavior. You can't control other people's." And
Mhm.
everybody's like, "Yeah, right, of course. But then what?" Right? What is this
Yes.
knowledge? What do I do with this knowledge? So that's the other place that you might find it, and you might feel like, "Oh, I know that. I can't control anybody but myself." But how does that change your life? How does that affect what you do and what you think and how you feel? And there's some, strategies to put into place to create a better life for yourself, a happier life.
Yeah, and people are going to love this show today because essentially the toolkit that your program gives them is 6 tools that have been shown, I believe, up to this point to be applicable to every situation. So if you want to talk about how the tools that we're going to get into later have been applicable to a wide variety of situations in people's lives.
Sure. Well, it's interesting because when I created Mental Freedom, I had a target market in mind, and I was
Mm.
thinking women in business, specifically male dominated professions, because women who work in male dominated professions have a lot of pressure to conform to the male model of success, which means no emotion, right?
Mhm.
We're intellectual, not emoting. If we're emoting, that means something derogatory about us as women. But that is an essential part of what makes us feminine and female. And it's important to be able to bring that with us into whatever environment that we're in. So I think that there's pressure on women in the workplace to have this persona that they're in control at all times and everything is fine and there's nothing wrong. Don't look here. There's nothing to see. But there's always something. I mean, we women, we have things that disrupt our happiness, that bother us. Men have it too, but men are much better at putting boundaries around those things and fencing them off from what they're doing in the current moment. And we women don't have that as one of our strengths. So things that are bothering us leak into our everyday life. And so that's who I was thinking I was developing this program for. But since I've developed it, it has helped so many different varieties of people. It's really interesting. So, of course, there's counselors who take it, because who has more pressure to be okay than counselors do? Because they're the ones
Mhm.
everybody's coming to for help. But if they're having a problem, then that says something. Maybe they're not a good enough counselor, is what they tell themselves. And then there's coaches, life coaches, business coaches, not athletic coaches. And then I have a man who got certified with me who uses mental freedom to help other men transitioning from prison into the community. And he said he's been looking for 40 years for a program that would really help
Mhm.
empower people rather than keep them dependent. And he says mental freedom was the answer for him. So he
Mhm.
wants to share that with others. And then there's people who use it in the classroom. So they're teachers and educators, and they've worked with people in high school, middle school, and even college age. So it's been a wide range. I was not sure if this would be appropriate for people who had experienced trauma in their life, but I found that it has been incredibly helpful for people who have experienced trauma. Sometimes people have already had counseling and thought that they were all worked through whatever trauma they had, and some aspects of it come up in mental freedom that they're able to really take out and look at and correct. And then sometimes mental freedom is the first place that they're looking at their trauma. And they may get everything they need in mental freedom, or they may decide to go on for some trauma counseling with a certified counselor. So it's been really an exciting time for me. And I still am holding out the possibility that there might be some problem out there that mental freedom is incapable of assisting with, but we haven't found it yet. And it's been 5 years now.
Mhm. And that's because mental freedom has roots in another psychological program as well, which is, I mean,
Yeah.
and that's been decades.
Right. So I have been a student of William Glasser, psychiatrist in the United States, who created reality therapy first and then choice theory psychology. And his choice theory psychology grew out of a concept called perceptual control theory, which was an engineering theory that was created by William Powell, an engineer.
Hmm.
And ironically, Glasser himself, psychiatrist that he was, first studied engineering. So he and Powell had this in common, and Glasser added some things to Powell's theory. And choice theory is what I work with and use in my counseling sessions since I started counseling, which is 1982.
Wow.
And yeah, it's been a long, long time. And that's been a theory, especially the engineering piece, that's been evidence based, scientifically based. And my mental freedom is built on Glasser's choice theory psychology. So it's like the work keeps expanding and
Mhm.
expanding. So
Yeah.
my technique is mental freedom. The theory behind it is choice theory.
Yeah, I love that because that's the key point. The technique is the like, how do we apply the theory? That
Right.
it's great to have, lofty ideas about, how things work, but how do you actually put them into place? So that's important too. And so if we talk about some of the issues that perhaps are impeding people's happiness that the program could assist with, and essentially the program has it's a 6-week program with 6 distinct tools. And so, I mean, one way to approach this could be that we talk about a a situation for a couple of the tools, right? And what the solution could be. So, like if we looked at week 1, for example, what that particular tool happens to help with, and we can see how many we managed to give examples for today. What do you think about that?
That works for me.
Okay, okay. So let's talk about without introducing the tool yet, what would the first tool perhaps assist people with um, getting some ease around?
Okay, so the first tool is about first learning what things are your responsibility, and then accepting that responsibility. Like, if it is to be, it is up to me. This is my responsibility. So I am going to take ownership of these pieces of my life. I'm not going to subcontract them to someone else. And once we step up and take responsibility for the things that are ours, then we also have to look at, are there places in your life where you're taking responsibility for something another person is actually responsible for? And how that affects you is, in some ways, it exhausts you, right?
Mhm.
There's enough to take care of by taking care of your own responsibilities.
Mhm.
And in another way, we're trying to do good for another person. That's usually what's motivating that behavior. And
Mhm.
we may do short-term good, meaning we take care of whatever crisis is on the table. But the long-term effect of that is we're robbing that person from the opportunity for growth in facing these problems on their own. Certainly, we could be there and walk with them and help them through it, but we don't just fix it for them. And so that can cause a dependence on us, which can be further exhausting. And we begin to wonder, why won't this person step up and take care of themselves? Well, because you've been doing it for so long. Why would they? So that's basically the first one. And then attached to that is also, we always have the ability to respond, even in situations that aren't our responsibility. This is what we do in good ways when we make charitable contributions. We recognize a problem, we volunteer our time and our money to help correct that problem. And that's us being response able. Um,
Mhm.
we get to choose what we're going to be responsible for. We can't possibly be responsible for everything in the world. There's way too many issues. So we choose what we're going to be responsible for, but I always ask us to consider two questions when we're making a decision to be responsible. And that is, do I genuinely want to do this? Is this the person I want to be in this situation? If the answer to that is yes, then that's the first step. Yes, go ahead. You can do that. The second thing is, how is my being responsible going to affect the other person if there's another person involved? So might this have negative effects for someone else? And is that the person that I want to be? So those are two things that help people decide if they want to go forward with being responsible. Sometimes it's better not to be. So
Mhm.
it's figuring that out for yourself.
I love this lesson, and when I think, now that you shared that you had initially created the group, or the program for women, when I think about this, I immediately think about us women who have so many responsibilities in and outside the home now that, many years ago it was women were just responsible for at home. But then when we transitioned to be more outside, then those responsibilities became even more and more on top. And so this lesson for me, and I think for the women that I've worked with too, has been is a very powerful one because it allows them to really evaluate all the responsibilities that they've taken on and where can they allocate some of those responsibilities to other people. Interestingly, the guest that I just had on the show just prior to yours is one in which we were talking about how women tend to do that because they have a hard time allocating it to other people, or they feel like other people don't do it right or don't do it the same way. And so we end up just like, okay, I'll just do it. And, I think when my children were younger, they're not as able. And so but now that they're older, then I was like, okay, now you can handle this and you can handle that. And you just have to let go and allow them to do it in the way that they're going to do it
Yes.
when they're going to do it. So for me, when I would learn this tool with you, I was thinking about my son who is never on the ball about putting his job is putting the dish is in the dishwasher and emptying the dishwasher as well. It's his responsibility, and that he doesn't do it as often as I would like for him, that he lets the dishes pile up a little bit. And I'm just like, no, no. And so that's where the second part of the tool is helpful, because you can choose to be response able. So then I'm like, sometimes I'm like, you know what? I have some extra time today. I'm just going to go ahead and do it. And other times I don't have the extra time. So I choose not to be response able. So there's just like practical application in the home for that particular tool, which that one, and for the moms, like I said, that I've worked with, many of them are like, yes, I should start to like allocate some of the responsibilities to other able people.
Right. I had a woman in one of my first sessions who told me she had a 40-year-old daughter who had an alcohol dependency. And that 40-year-old lived in her mother's home, and her mother would give her a weekly allowance. And she took the mental freedom experience and learned this first tool. And she said, if I delegate responsibility for my daughter's life to my daughter, she would end up homeless, and I can't let that happen.
Ooh.
Yeah, she felt that kind of responsibility. So I said, mental freedom is an abstract concept, right? You want more mental freedom, but not at the expense of giving up the responsibility you've assumed for your daughter. So it's okay. You don't have to do anything that we talk about in mental freedom. It's always a choice. So she left that session thinking, yeah, she wasn't going to release this responsibility. She being a good mother, in her definition, good mother, was more important to her than this particular aspect of mental freedom that she would get. But when she came back, she had given it a lot of thought, and she made a compromise. So what she did was, she didn't ask her daughter to leave her house, but she told her she wasn't going to give her any more money.
Mm.
And so her daughter, in the time between our first session and our second session, chose on her own, without any pushing from her mother, to go into a rehab. And her mother was so happy. And it came when she said, your financial situation is not my responsibility. I'll give you a home to live in, but you're responsible for your own finances. And she realized she had a real problem, and she went into rehab, and she is now in recovery from alcoholism. So her mom's really happy, and realizes that maybe being a good mom sometimes is making the hard decisions.
Yeah, that's a good one. Okay, I'm excited to get to tool number 2. And I feel like tool number 2 is getting a lot of exposure in the media, because Mel Robbins, I would say, has put her twist on this tool, right?
She
But it's not,
has.
this is a tool that goes way back, much more before her latest book came out. And so whenever people talk about that, I'm like, yeah, but mental freedom already had that tool in it. And it was talked about long before. And so before we share what that, and maybe people have a bit of an idea already, or what that could be, but can you maybe preface it a little bit about, why this tool is part of the program? Why is it important for us to do the particular challenge that you're going to talk about? Share that with us.
Well, the reason it's so important is because relationships are central and core in our life. Without relationships, we're kind of adrift. We need community. We need relationships in order for us to be able to have a happy life. So our relationships get challenged when we subcontract the responsibility for what is ours to other people. So some of those things, we really didn't talk about that, but one of the things that I'm responsible for is my own happiness. If I say to someone in my life, I'll be happy when you do blank, I'm giving them responsibility for my happiness. That's crazy. I want to be in charge of my happiness, right? I don't want my happiness to be connected to what other people do or don't do. I have no control over that. I can ask for what I want for sure. It doesn't mean you can't ask other people to do things that would increase your happiness. And a lot of times people who care about you, who love you, are more than happy to help and do a piece that you're asking for. But this challenge is about trusting that every person in your life, and even those people on the planet that aren't in your life, so for every single person, they are doing the best that they know to do to get what they want. Now, sometimes what they want isn't a good thing. Sometimes you might not agree with what they want. And sometimes you might think, well, there's 1,000 better ways to get that than the one you picked. But but in that moment, that was the way the person thought was the best way to get what they wanted. Now, when I think about this, I think of my youngest son, Kyle, who joined the Army when he was a senior in high school. No, I think he was a junior in high school, actually. It might have been a senior. He was a week before his 18th birthday, so he must have been a senior. And he joined the Army, and he was dating a girl that was currently a sophomore. So he was a senior, she was a sophomore. He left when he graduated. He left, went to basic training, then he had desert training, then he went to Iraq. So in essence, he was basically away from home for about a year, and then another year when he was deployed to Iraq. And Jessie, bless her heart, was just loyal, devoted. She was in it for the long haul. And I loved this girl. Well, Kyle went to Iraq, and he had his 19th birthday while he was there. So he was 18 when he went, turned 19. And he and Jessie stayed connected all through that time. And at that point, they had a mid-cycle break. So Kyle came home in October and got engaged to Jessie, who was just a junior in high school. So it was way too early, I thought, for them to get engaged, but it's not my life. I'm a choice theory parent, so I left it be, his decision. He bought her a beautiful ring. He actually asked me to go to the jewelry store with him, and they planned a wedding for when he came home. He was coming home in June. They were getting married in August. He came home and knew he was not ready to be married. He had things he had to work through. I don't know anybody who goes to war and doesn't come back changed in some way, and he wasn't ready. He didn't know how to tell her that. So he treated her terribly. He was mean to her. He was pushing her away. And Jessie was so committed. She was not going to be pushed away. She was in it. She just knew she had to love him more, and he would come around. And I kept saying to her, I wish you could just give him some space. He really needs the space. And she said, no, he needs my love. And so Kyle, in his 19-year-old wisdom, arranged for her to find him with another girl.
Ooh.
It was horrible, in my opinion. I was so mad. And then I had to remember he was 19 years old and he needed to push her away. He didn't know how to have the conversation. He felt if he had the conversation, she would stick around. He didn't know how to make the cut clean. And so it worked. She took off the ring, threw it at him, stormed out. She was devastated. I was devastated. And then Kyle was home for a little while. Then he went back to Iraq. He came back the second time, and she was engaged to someone else. And he called her up and said, Jessie, please don't marry him. I still love you. And that girl, to her credit, did not go running into his arms, but she did give him a second chance, told her fiance that Kyle wanted another chance and she felt like she needed to give it to him. And he hung in there with her until she made her decision that she was going to marry Kyle. And she is now my daughter-in-law. So this this was a great, great story. But I had to unconditionally trust my son, Kyle, that he was doing the best he knew to do to deal with that situation. And while I could have thought of a million other ways to do it, he couldn't. He did the best he knew to do to get the result that he wanted. And he got it. But then, he had to do some new behaviors to win her back. So it was, I think, so the point is, I got a little sidetracked there, Teresa, but the point is that we often have expectations of other people and how they're going to behave. And we expect that if they tell us they're going to love us forever, then they have to love us forever because they said they would. Or if they said they were going to stop at the store and pick up something you needed for dinner, that they would do that so that you could cook dinner. But then you find out they come home without it because they had a rough day at work and they were processing everything that happened at work and completely forgot to get you what you asked for. So then we get angry with people and we feel like we can't trust them. But it's the wrong kind of trust, because we want to trust people to be who we want them to be instead of who they really are. So when we trust that everybody's doing their best to get what they want in that moment with the information available to them, now we don't have to judge them anymore. We don't have to be angry. We can find some compassion and maybe eventually some forgiveness, not for the other person's sake, but for our sake. Because when we hold on to bitterness and resentment and frustration, you've heard that expression, holding a grudge is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. That's not good for us or for the other person. So I find this particular tool, I learned it the hard way. I was unconditionally trusting someone to do what I thought they should do. And they didn't, because what they wanted was something completely different than what I wanted them to want. And that caused me to create this thing called the Unconditional Trust Challenge, because we take it so personally. Somebody breaks a commitment to us, we think it's because of us, that they don't care about us, or we're not important to them, or we tell ourselves all these stories that have nothing to do with the reality. The reality is the person wanted something in that moment, and they did the thing that was best for them in that moment to get what they wanted. And that's it. And if you care about them, you want them to have what they wanted, even if it makes life harder for you. So that can help hold relationships together that should be held together, but it can also help you gain the clarity on a person that may have you say, you're not who I thought you were. And that means I need to change the nature of our relationship. Either I'm going to end it, I'm going to dive head first, I'm going to create some boundaries, I'm going to care about you, but from a distance, whatever it is you decide to do, it's a good decision, because now you're seeing them clearly. You're not seeing them the way you want them to be. You're actually seeing who they are and deciding, is this a relationship I want to have, or is it a relationship I want to end, or is it a relationship I need to adjust?
I think there's two parts that make this lesson powerful. Number one, acknowledging that the person is doing what they need to do to get their needs met. And so in the program, we talk about what those needs are, but the needs are always the driving force behind the behavior. So when you look at the behavior, so now what I try to do is like analyze a bit to say, okay, what need were they trying to fill? Why that's powerful is that it's not, as you said, a reflection of yourself, right? So, what is it about me that made this person do X, Y, and Z? Or what's lacking in me, or why maybe I'm too much, and that's why they went in and they did what they did. But it has nothing to do with you. You can remove yourself from that situation to say, okay, what is it about the needs in that individual that maybe I'm contributing to why they have that particular need for some freedom, because maybe I'm like too nagging or something, who knows. But to say, you can think about what need might they be trying to fill, and by stepping out of the situation, this is the second half why I think this lesson is powerful, is that by allowing people to show you who they are, right? So, if we go back to, the let them theory, when you allow people to show you who they are, you can make now a decision based on, what's best for you. Now that you have allowed them to fully show you, their truth, whether in what and however they might be exhibiting, that truth through whatever behavior they're doing. But then I can now, I since have to do this when you live in a home with other people, and we all have different people in our lives, even at work, that we are able to make a choice for ourselves. It is so empowering because we're no longer a victim to other people's actions. Otherwise, that's how you feel. As you said, if only you were different, if only this was different, if only, then I'd be happy. But in some of my previous shows, we've talked about how we are creating the life we are living with every moment and in every choice that we make. And that particular, when that person has made their choice, you are now in the position to make a choice for yourself. And that
Yes.
you're not a victim to the choice. You can now decide what you're going to do with that information, which I find it so powerful for all the things that are happening outside of our lives that we have no control over.
Right. And Mel Robbins actually talks about that. She says, let them, and then let me. And let
Mhm.
me is usually about a boundary that she wants to draw based on what the other person is doing, which is beautiful. It completely embraces the unconditional trust challenge. So,
Mhm. Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, love that lesson. That one I find so empowering because everything outside of yourself is really outside of your control. You can't control your kids, you can't control your pets, you can't control the weather, you can't control it's all outside.
Your
And
boss.
this is
Yeah.
yeah, all of it, right? And all you can do is control yourself. And so when you can look at it though from that angle, which I don't know if she dives into necessarily, understanding the needs component, which
No.
is very powerful, right? Is that when you know what those needs are, then you can think, okay, well, which need was it that they were maybe filling? And I really enjoy that part because
Yeah.
that I didn't know either. So I think that lesson's really great. So if you had to choose one of the other ones in the lesson, not number 5, because
Right. That's too complicated.
do that one. But one of the other ones that you think is quite popular in the sense that many of us kind of fall into inside of that situation. And then and how we would get out of it. What do you think?
I would like to talk about the last one.
Okay, I
So,
love that one.
yeah, appreciating the glow. And the GLOW is an acronym, and it's developed to help people understand that every painful thing we experience has obviously pain. That's what makes it painful. But it also has equal amounts of glow, which is positivity. And this is a lesson, this coupled with the unconditional trust challenge, that actually helps people who have experienced trauma. Um, and so GLOW stands for gifts, lessons, opportunities, and wisdom. So when you've been through something painful, you're going to feel the pain because our brains are hardwired with a negativity bias. And we tend to notice what's really wrong with our lives before we take the time to look at what's right with our lives, which is another thing that contributes to unhappiness is our focus. What are we focusing on? Because if you want to find what's wrong with your life, you'll find it. And if you want to
Mhm.
find what's great about your life, you can find that too, but you have to be motivated to look for it. So that's the same as with the GLOW. We have painful experiences. And there's this man named John DeMartini who wrote a book called The Breakthrough Experience that I read 20 years ago. And in the Breakthrough Experience, he talks about the periodic table of elements and how every element in our natural world has equal positive and negative charges. It has the same number of protons as it does electrons. And he said that's also true of the events in our life. So if you have a painful event that you would give on a scale of 1 to 100, say an 83 in pain, that means there's 83 positivity associated with it. All you have to do is look for it. Now, this is a tricky one because I'm not saying don't think about your pain, just get over it and think about what the benefits are. That's crazy. I mean, the pain doesn't go away, but you can neutralize it with positivity when you're ready. And that's the important part. You have to be ready. You have to say to yourself, I'm tired of feeling like this. I'm tired of being disengaged with my life. I'm tired of being not present with the people in my life. I want to get back engaged. So then you think, okay, let's look at what glow could be happening here. So I like to share the example of my husband when he passed away in 1999. That was my first experience of being exposed to this information and my first time of using it. So my husband had leukemia and he passed away. And so that was pretty painful. If I had to give it a number, I would say 83. That's why I picked that number, right? I could say 100, but I know that there must be more painful things. I just haven't experienced them yet. So I'm saying 83. So I thought, what could possibly be good about this? And that felt really wrong to even think about. But I thought, I have 2 sons who were teenagers at the time, and I knew I was gonna have to help them through it. So I thought, let me at least entertain the question. And in that moment, I thought of 2 things. The first thing was we were gonna have the opportunity to say goodbye. It wasn't gonna be this sudden. My husband had a massive heart attack, and the last thing I said to him was, "I hate you." Or the last thing I
Mhm.
said to him was, "Would you pick up some milk on your way home from work today?" You don't want that to be the last thing you say to someone that you love. So I knew we would have our relationships in order. We'd have said all the things that we wanted to say. The second thing was, and this was a true gift, my husband learned that the type of leukemia he had was associated with the chemical benzene, which is present in car engines, and he was an auto mechanic. So he stopped working as soon as he learned that because he thought, why should I keep working with cars if this is actually killing me? So when he stopped working, he was still relatively healthy, had a lot of energy. And so in those 4 years, he spent a lot of time with my children. He coached their little league team, he coached their soccer team, and he'd never played baseball or soccer. He helped them with wrestling. He was quite the wrestler, so he passed on a lot of wisdom there. He taught them about working on cars. He took them hunting. He took them fishing. And we had a family vacation to Disney World. None of that would have happened if he had been healthy and lived to 100 because my husband was a bit of a workaholic. He didn't have time to do those kinds of things. So that was a true gift. Now, did those 2 things equal 83? No, not even close.
Mhm.
But over time, you get to collect other things like the best man in our wedding, his best friend was a gay man that never came out of the closet until after Dave died because he knew that my husband would have a hard time with it. They had been wrestling partners,
Mhm.
rolling around on wrestling mats together, showering together. They even double dated together. And he knew that my husband would not be able to accept that, and he didn't want to deal with that. So my husband died, this man could live. Another thing that happened was we were working on finding him a bone marrow donor because none of his family was a match for him. So we raised a lot of money and were able to put 350 new people on the bone marrow registry. At that time, it cost $100 to be tested to get on the bone marrow registry, which is why not very many
Mhm.
people were on it. So none of them matched my husband, which was really devastating, but they went on to match other people and save other people's lives. So I could keep going on and on and on. But
Mhm.
since I've left Pennsylvania, I live in Chicago. I have my own business. I was the director of William Glasser. I wrote many books. I've traveled the world. None of those things would have happened. I would still be living on a dirt road in Northeast Pennsylvania working at a foster care agency. It was the life I had with my husband, a life I liked, but it's not the expansive life that I live now. So my husband died and I've blossomed. And I think that that was another opportunity and a gift. So when you have had painful situations and you're ready, you can look for the glow. And every time you find something, it frees you a little bit more from the pain. The pain doesn't go away, but it gets transformed into neutrality. Yes, there was pain and there was glow. And when the balance is reached, you won't feel trapped by the pain anymore. And it's a beautiful place to get to. And I've felt so privileged to be able to help lots of people find that space. So that's why I chose that last session, because I think that brings all of mental freedom full circle.
No, it's a beautiful lesson. Now, this is what came to mind as I was listening to you speak, and I'm just wondering how you think that this falls in. So, there's this expression when bad things happen to us that some people will use, which is everything happens for a reason. Now,
Yeah.
that expression feels like shit. So, say it bluntly, when depending on what's happened to you, let's say you find out you get cancer. Well, that doesn't feel like a good reason right now. Everything happens for a reason. So where does that statement fall into that last lesson?
Well, it's placating, right? It doesn't have a lot of substance to it. And I've also heard people say, well, don't think about that. Think about all the good things in your life.
Mm.
And again, it's like, think positive. Okay, great. But is that really something that will serve you and will help you? Because when somebody's dealing with pain, that's not what they want to hear. And so I like to introduce this lesson as there's an opportunity for you when you're ready to look at the glow in this situation. If you're not ready now, there is no push for you to do this. Sometimes we need to sit with our new reality and let ourselves adjust to that. But what I don't want people to do is feel like they've been forever altered and changed by this, whatever the painful event was, that they're broken and they'll never be the same again. It's true, you won't be the same as you were, but you can build back even better when you find the glow. The glow is different from just cheer up or, yeah, this happened for a reason. We may not know what that is until we're gone from here. That doesn't feel like helpful in any way. You can have faith that, yes, this happened for a reason, and maybe when I'm gone, it'll be revealed to me. But that doesn't help you now. And I want people to know that there's help available right now if you're ready for it. When I had my hot air balloon accident, which is a whole nother story I won't go into, but we had a very bad landing and I broke both of my legs. And in the balloon, while I was waiting for people to come and get me out of the balloon, I remember having the thought in real time, well, Kim, now you get a chance to practice what you preach. So I was able to find glow in the moment, but that was after at least 15 years of looking for glow in my pain and in my clients' pain. So I was quite practiced at it. So I don't expect that you'll be able to do that right away, but that is something that can happen if you keep practicing this over time. It's going to get easier and easier and easier. And it's a game changer. It really is. It's not everything happens for a reason. Think positive. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. All those platitudes that are said when we don't know what to say. But
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, this is real, something you can sink your teeth into when you're ready, if you want to. And that's everything about mental freedom. It's never prescriptive. It's always invitational. So if you're feeling a need for more mental freedom, you can try some of these tools that Teresa and I have talked about. And you'll see that you'll become a little more mentally free. If you want to try some other tools, you can become even more mentally free. So it's all about increments, I think. Even though some people dive in and do it all at once, that's fine. You can do that too. But you might find that, one really speaks to you. So start with that one and then,
Mhm.
go forward from there. It's a
One
lifetime journey.
Oh, yeah, because life keeps throwing new things at you all the time. And so now at least I have a checklist, right? I have
Right.
my 6 tools and I look at those 6 tools and I think which one can I apply? And often we might have to apply more than one because it just works to get me over that, to bring me back to my place of peace, back to my place of freedom, and where I didn't have that before. And in the moment, you need something like that. You need this toolkit that you now know for yourself, right? Not that you're dependent on when your next therapy appointment is or
Right.
you can't get in, right? It's like you have something immediate, as you said, that you can turn to. And the more that you practice them, then you get to the point, as you said, that in the moment you were able just to start doing it without having to reflect on it later,
Right.
right?
Right.
And so I think that's what makes it so helpful. The other part that I want to let people know about it is that when working with us is that you don't even need to technically divulge all of the skeletons and hardship and issues that you may be going through, because when we talk about the tool and give all the tenets of it, and how you could apply it and whatnot, that technically somebody wouldn't even really need to reveal what, unless they wanted to talk through it, they can, of course. But if they didn't want to, because for me, part of my own personal story is that I didn't feel comfortable talking about it. And a lot of the healing I did was all on my own in the privacy of like my own spaces. Um, because I just didn't feel like I could for various
Mhm.
reasons.
Mhm.
And what I love about this is that somebody can come to us wanting to know the toolkit, but not having to share any of the struggles and hardships that they're looking to overcome.
Yeah, I think that makes it very special also because
Mhm.
in counseling, you're expected, of course, to talk about your pain. And there's a place for that, I believe. I am a
Mhm.
counselor after all.
Mm.
But I also think that sometimes we counselors are a bit like the rubberneckers at a car accident. Tell me how horrible your life is, because then I can go home and feel good that my life isn't as bad as yours. That's a bit of an exaggeration, and I'm trying to be funny here. But I don't need to know your struggles to help you fix them. I trust that you have the intuition that when you hear the tools and you get all the information, you will intuitively know where you most need to apply that. And I've had
Mm.
people come to me for one issue. There was one woman in particular. She came to me because her job was killing her, literally, and she wanted out. But her husband wasn't happy about her getting out because it put them in a whole different financial situation. And his high need was safety and security. And hers, by the way, was freedom. So they were opposites on that particular area. So she came to me thinking that it was about the job. But as we talked, it became increasingly clear to her that the problem was the relationship with her husband, not the job.
Mm.
Although the job was crap. I mean, she needed to leave the job. But it was really that she wanted to know that her husband was in her corner all the time and could see how horrible this job was for her, and he wasn't seeing it. And so we did a full pivot, but she came to that on her own. I didn't have to tell her. There was another person, I think you know
Mhm.
Scott. He was working with a woman who was talking about, workplace issues. She was a newly promoted manager, and she was struggling with some growing pains. But as she worked through this information, she got to the unconditional trust challenge, and it took her back to when she was a little girl and her sister passed away, and she realized she had unresolved issues with that. So the unconditional trust challenge really helped her work
Wow.
through that, but she knew where to go. And so I trust that the people that come to me that go through mental freedom, the people that go to you, Teresa, they know where they need to use this. And I'll also say that I've come to understand that sometimes people need to go through a mental freedom experience more than once. So they go through it once as who they are now. They grow, they learn, they live their life, and then maybe
Mhm.
they hit an obstacle that they're not sure how to negotiate. So they come back and they do a new mental freedom experience, and they find that they're going deeper into some areas that they thought maybe were okay, but now they'll get more growth out of that. So it can be that you do more than one mental freedom experience if you run into something that's bigger than the tools you have at your disposal right then. So
Mhm.
that's been
Mhm.
fun to watch that happen. But
Yeah, wow. So, Kim, if people want to find out more about it, about you and all the offerings, where can they go for that?
well, I would refer them to my website, Olver. It's OLV as in Victor, ER, olverinternational.com, where pretty much everything I do is there. There's a mental freedom tab. You'll find out all about the mental freedom offerings. And there's other things there too, but that's the most important for what we're talking about in this conversation.
Okay, awesome. And then we have an event upcoming too, if you want to talk about that. People get
Oh,
curious.
yes, it is our very first mental freedom conference that's designed for people who are mental freedom curious. So you may not be ready for a mental freedom experience. It's a big investment. And this is just a 1 day, 9 to 4 on Zoom. So you don't have to leave your home. You don't have to leave your bedroom. If you have a computer, you can do it right from your bed if you want. And Teresa's going to do a presentation in there that I'm really looking forward to called Mental Freedom and Spirituality. And that will be a really great application for mental freedom. And there's also a woman doing a presentation on using mental freedom in parenting and with their partner, their life partner. And then we're going to have 3 other people who are facilitating conversations around each of the 6 tools. And we'll be doing some exercises and some interactive learning throughout the day. So I'm really looking forward to it. And you'll find that also at Olver International. It is one of the events, Mental Freedom Conference. It's in the banner on the homepage. So you'll find it there.
Yay! That
Yay.
sounds exciting. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So if anybody's curious after our conversation today, definitely go in and check that out. Sign up. We'd love to have you there for the day. And so, Kim, I want to thank you so much for sharing more about your program and and offering tools that people can take away from our conversation right away, which is amazing. So thank you so much for being with us today.
Oh, Teresa, it's been my pleasure. And thank you for the invitation. This was terrific.